Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President doubling down on this, saying that he can move this by executive order. Can he?
No, he can't. He can't do it by executive order, and he can't even do it by legislation. You know, conservatives have been talking for decades about the need to follow the text of the Constitution. Justice Scalia called himself a textualist. Well, the text here couldn't be clearer. If you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, regardless of who your parents are. It's a settled issue, and it's not complicated.
Kris, the text is all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. and of the state wherein they reside. Where is where is that not correct? Where does that not apply to aliens?
The key is, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. As Jeffrey knows, all words in the Constitution have meaning. You can't read words out of the Constitution. And so the question is, what does "and subject to the jurisdiction thereof" mean? And if you look at the debates in 1866 and 1867 in the Congress, which drafted the 14th Amendment, and if you look at the statements of Howard Jacobs and Lyman Trumbull, who were the two principal drafters, they said it means owing no allegiance to any foreign power, owing allegiance only to the United States. And that would mean that a person who is here temporarily, or certainly a person who is here illegally, owes allegiance to another power. In other words, is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So those words have meaning. It was never intended to be, if you're born here and no other criterion is met, you get to become a citizen.
Kris, your critics point out to the fact that the voter law that you tried to pass in your state was actually ruled unconstitutional by a federal judge, who was a George W. Bush appointee. So your critics say, are you really a legal scholar? I know you did go to Yale Law School, and I certainly didn't. I couldn't even get in, or not that I applied, but I know because I couldn't even get in if I had. But there, your critics say that you're not an expert on the Constitution either. In fact, you were ordered to go to like 6 hours of extra classes on the law by this federal judge.
Look, I taught constitutional law at the University of Missouri for 15 years. It is often the case, in cases like this that are very controversial and where there's some gray area in the law, that a judge will have an opinion, and that judge will be overruled, and then the Supreme Court will rule in as well. I think Jeffrey would agree that just because you have a district judge who doesn't agree with you on a case doesn't mean that you're not going to see a different decision come out of the Court of Appeals. That case is being appealed. And that the position that the judge took, by the way, that a state cannot require voters to prove citizenship when they register, that argument was rejected by the Ninth Circuit about 10 years ago.
Well, Kris,
the notion that,
Kris has devoted his career to stopping black people and poor people from voting. I mean, that's been your goal for decades.
That is an outrageous accusation.
Well, it's completely true.
That is an absolutely outrageous accusation.
I mean,
so if you like photo ID, you're trying to stop people of color from voting?
Absolutely.
That is outrageous.
Absolutely.
And by the way, when this question is polled, the vast majority of African Americans approve of photo ID. So apparently they're trying to do what you're saying I'm trying to do. That is outrageous. It is such a horrible accusation.
It is a completely true accusation because, Kris, I mean, your whole career has, I mean, that's why you had this phony voter suppression commission that was such a preposterous joke established by the president that it disbanded because it couldn't prove your claim that voter fraud is a problem in this country. Your problem is that some people vote for Democrats, and you want to stop that by establishing voter requirements.
It is Thursday, the 1st of November of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Speaking of a little bit of spice in your life, hey, that was Kris Kobach and Jeffrey Toobin. Really, Kobach didn't like it when Toobin called him out for being really a racist. And, well, Kobach, sorry, but you are a racist. Your policies have always been racist. And I don't know why you dislike being exposed as such. Apparently, it's the go-to position for right-wingers like you. So, come on. Embrace who you are, all right? And that way we can make sure you're voted out of office and sent to the dustbin of history, because that's the go-to cliche. Okay? All righty. Well, looks like we might have to have some concentration camps. Caravan concentration camps. Yeah. Trump came out today and said, yeah, they're going to have caravan concentration camps. Any refugee who tries to come to the United States and legally present themselves at a border apparently is going to be thrown in a concentration camp. And I think it's because it plays to the Trump voter who really would just like a caravan concentration camp spelled with K's. KKK. Oh, but don't call them Nazis. All right. Just don't. Okay. Well, there's even more bizarreness. We got a new Willie Horton ad out. They're pulling out everything. They want a race war. The way that Trump wants a race war, just like Charlie Manson, you'd think Trump was dissed by the Beach Boys as well. Man, I don't know. I see the blood written on the wall right now. Oh, God. It's not going to get better after the midterms, especially if we have the blue wave that's somewhat expected. It will not get better. It is only going to get worse because toxicity as it becomes more concentrated, becomes more toxic. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Trump actually came out and said that 33% of the American public, basically the ones who vote for him, really want to have caravan concentration camps, and it's okay to be a nationalist, and that's 33%, and that's about who votes for him, and that has always been about how much crazy there's been in America, right around a third. What else is happening out in the world? Well, so much. We got boats still flipping in Texas, and nothing will be done about it. Georgia continues to prevent people from voting, and you know, I was actually reminded that Brian Kemp arrested Get Out the Vote activists. When I say activists, I mean, you know, people who were helping people vote. One person was looking at 100 years because she helped her partially blind elderly father fill out his absentee ballot. Another was looking at about 200 years for taking some ballots to the mailbox in an illegal transportation of ballots. She collected, like 10 ballots on her block, put them in the corner mailbox, and Brian Kemp wanted to arrest her. Oh, did I mention that these people are black? And now everything is being thrown up against the wall. We got a wag the dog BS. We got the Willie Horton ad BS. Sounds like they're going to lose, doesn't it? They also warned us that there will be violent repercussions when they do. So who's the patriot? And who are the nationalists? And who, then, are the true Americans? Because this is not a both sides BS, let's be clear. What's on the rest of the menu here today? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Trump's EPA concludes communities do not have the right to know about potentially toxic emissions. Because the more the people know, the more they get in the way. Trump's Medicare chief says more Americans having Medicare is scary. Because if people have health insurance, that means they might live longer and they might vote Democratic, and you can't have that. And Trump officials find 14 more children that they forgot that they had kidnapped. Oh no, more. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where the U.S. charged Chinese intelligence officers for a jet engine data hack that hit several of the world's largest aerospace companies. Yeah, a turbofan that they were trying to manufacture. Couldn't quite get it. And this is a little bit more than just industrial espionage, let's be clear. And ex-White House Counsel Don McGahn left the job in a frantic hurry after Trump began blaming him for the Mueller investigation. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Days left before we actually can no longer vote in this election. Please go to our homepage at networksradio.com to make sure you are registered to vote. And there, as I've stated before, there are many states that you can register to vote right up about to Election Day. But more importantly, please do vote if you haven't. Early voting is continuing, and we got really until Tuesday. And if you have not voted, or if you have, please take some friends to go vote. I mean, you could be a ferry service to get people to vote, especially when polling places have been moved out of town for 13,000 people. You know, that happens. Yeah, in Kansas. All right. There's no place like home, as they say. Okay, then if you would go to the bottom of our homepage at networksradio.com, you will notice the chat room link on the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and that is a fine way to engage with us. And Kelly does monitor that rather diligently, even when she has to go out, work at some jobs to pay the bills. She's that dedicated. So do follow Kelly on Twitter, and do check out her shows on Saturdays. The first one being At the Table with Kelly Lincoln, beginning at 3 p.m. on the West Coast. That would be 6 p.m. on the East. Later on, she teams up with Ricky May, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. Would you then please take a gander to the leftish of our homepage at networksradio.com, down there at the bottom, from the chat room link, by the way. You will then notice our contribute button. That is a way for you, hopefully, to become a Patreon of Netroots Radio, because your generosity keeps the lights a-burning, meaning that we keep our bills paid, And I have found that if you pay your bills, you can slide under the radar and keep resisting, even when they throttle the data speeds. Boy, we got to stop that too. So go vote. And thank you for your generosity. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow us on Facebook as well. That's a good way to do it. Please follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Most importantly, here in this little block of screed that I do every show is a reminder that I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, and you can find me there as Justice Putnam. And those show notes and links have a lot of show notes and links. So please go there. It is an integral part of this multimedia operation. You can follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West. Of course, we're on Facebook and other social media platforms. Pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, boy. We had I actually thought we had quite a few kids last night. It was quite neat. The weather wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It being the middle of the school week, I thought would be, an issue. But every kid under, I don't know, the age of 10, 11 had parents. And we only had a few kids 12 and older. So that was, I deemed it a success. And it was fun, actually. So we didn't go to any great extent to decorate the house as some of the neighbors did. But we had a steady line up the walkway too, so quite fun. Okay, let's get on with this first article here. Out of Think Progress by Mark Hand. And I always say, one of the reasons that Trump has filled all of these various cabinet positions, the various departments within the administrative state of the United States, to essentially poison it from within, let them wither and die off, because property is always more valuable when you can deliver it vacant. Okay? And we already know the Russians are totally willing to overpay for property as it is, but it's always more valuable when it's vacant. So if you can essentially, make it so that people don't really want to be Americans, guess what else will happen then? I wonder. What factory farm owners portray as normal odors from animal waste can cause serious harm to farmers and the residents who live near these large industrial operations. Ever lived near a pig farm? I mean, that's the worst. I got to tell you. Cattle slaughterhouse areas? Yeah, that's really a freshening experience, isn't it? You can rest assured none of these people making these edicts will ever live not nearby, the slaughter stockyards of any, four-legged animal or two. The Trump administration, like it has with many important health and safety rules, is siding with industry and ignoring how animal waste can have serious impacts on the health of Americans. Yeah. The effluent that came out of these pig farm holding ponds. Nice. Had a storm. Ponds got breached. Effluent-filled, concentrated ponds flowed into the local water source. What could go wrong? So you get higher incidences of diphtheria and other diseases that pretty much kill you. Gosh, we're going back to the 1900s again, when America was really great. Embracing the normal odor argument, acting EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler signed a proposed rule to amend emergency release notification regulations to let industrial agricultural operations off the hook from reporting air emissions from animal waste at their farms. Thanks. This, despite the mountain of evidence that shows concentrated animal feeding operations produce toxic air that can be lethal for farm workers and nearby residents. I think the jargon means, they call it concentrated animal feeding operations. They might mean farms, but I really think what they mean are industrial-sized farms. Let's be clear. The smell from a small family farm of, say, maybe 30 milk cows, or even 130, isn't too bad. But how about the smell of a slaughterhouse stockyard with, 50, 60, 70,000 animals milling about? Yeah, it creates its own weather, and you can see it for miles. Isn't that nice? The proposed rule is intended to make it clear to the regulated community that animal waste emissions from farms do not need to be reported under this edict. Now, this is edict is EPCRA, and it stands for Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. If these people know that we are emitting these levels of emissions, they might get concerned. It's only the smell of poop. Why are people so upset? Well, when I used to work for Gulf Oil, I would sometimes complain about how bad the smells were. Because up until that time, I just heard the term, from the bowels of the earth. And I took it just as a literary flourish. And then I worked in an industry that was actually drilling down into the bowels of the earth. And you know what? It stinks to high heaven. But you know what my fellow workers told me? Said, yeah, you drill down into there, but then we refine it, and then it smells really sweet. I go, I don't know. I don't really consider, gasoline to be sweet. And he says, oh, no. You don't understand. It smells like money. Oh, okay. Well, one man's poop is another man's fortune, as they say. Huh? Dale, also of Think Progress, brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Oh, one other thing. I haven't mentioned about the Old Bay for a little bit. Keep it in your cupboard, okay? Only break out the Old Bay for the clam bake. I know people think it's a generic seafood type of spice, but please, in the Metro Shrimp and Grits, please, just the hot smoked either Spanish or Hungarian paprika is all you need. And only a smidgen, which is less than a dash. All right? Less is more, as they say. And keep the Old Bay in the cupboard. The Medicare head, Seema Verma, tried to make a joke about Medicare for all, and it didn't go too well. And she's been on this morning, essentially saying, hey, I got your attention, didn't I? Let me try to bamboozle you some more. Well, Seema Verma is not a well-known member of Trump's administration, but she is an important one. As the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, Verma is in charge of overseeing health programs that over 100 million Americans rely on. So it seemed like an odd choice for Trump's Medicare chief to call the proposal to expand Medicare coverage to more Americans scary in an attempted Halloween joke on Wednesday. Now, Verma's tweet, now she had put this out on a tweet, by the way, which quickly achieved a ratio status, and that's some sort of term of art in the metrics of that Twitter must use, was followed by her promoting an interview with Sinclair Broadcasting chief, political analyst, and Trump toady Boris Epshteyn. Well, you know, the Russian guy. During which she explained why more Americans having health care coverage is simply a bad idea. Really? Medicare for All is a universal health care proposal that would expand the current Medicare program to cover everyone regardless of age. Over a dozen Democratic senators, including a number of presumed 2020 presidential hopefuls, endorsed the Medicare for All plan, introduced by Bernie Sanders, and a third of the Democrats in the House started a Medicare for All caucus in July. Republicans have gone all out to try and discredit the popular health care proposal in advance of the midterms, like they think that's going to be a winning strategy, including a laughably false op-ed from Trump that struggled with basic facts, which I got to tell you is not a bad thing with his base. And I got to tell you, they're sick about it. To mention before we get into this article out of Share Blue Media by Dan Desai Martin is that you did hear Whitey Bulger was murdered right after he was transferred to a new facility. Someone or some people beat him to death with some batteries in a sock, and he had his eyes gouged out too. Ick. Now, I'm sorry for the brutal descriptions, but it is Whitey Bulger after all. And when interviewed, a lot of South Boston denizens didn't believe that he was dead and were afraid to say so, at least publicly, because there is an old adage. If you think Whitey Bulger is dead, it might be you who will be dead, because it's happened before. And so a lot of Southies are afraid that Whitey Bulger lives. Okay, Southies, keep being you. All right, let's get into this article by Dan Desai Martin. New victims of Trump's heartless ploy to hurt immigrant families by tearing away children, including babies, from their families has been discovered. In a recent court filing, the Trump administration said it recently discovered 14 more migrant children who had been separated from their parents at the border and were not in the official count of separated minors. We'll put them in concentration camps. Oh, you already are? Is that why all those tent cities are being built along the border? Even before Trump came out this morning and said we need concentration camps, more tent cities. How dare these refugees come here and present themselves at a point of entry as the law requires? We'll show them. Advocates fighting to reunite the victims of state-sanctioned cruelty with their families were understandably outraged at the callous disregard shown by an administration that lost track of children they took from their families. Over the summer, Trump instituted a zero-tolerance policy at the U.S.-Mexico border and began separating families. While Trump officials initially lied about what they were doing, The discovery of baby jails and children locked in cages soon exposed the world to the true horror Trump had approved. Well, images of frightened children dominated the news, and Trump reluctantly relented, eventually halting the policy, but new reports show Trump may reinstitute the policy in the future. Well, while much of the nation and the world was horrified by Trump's policy over the summer, many Republicans defended it. In Pennsylvania, Representative Scott Perry made up false stories about human trafficking to defend the practice, going so far as to lament that federal law prohibits children from being held for more than 20 days. These guys are Nazis. Former CIA director and four-star General Michael Hayden compared Trump's family separation policy to Nazi Germany, so it's not just me. One key difference, and I've noticed this too, is that the Nazis kept better records of their atrocities. Imagine when they get a white nationalist who can actually make the trains run on time. Well, we better get on to our break. And when we come back from the break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
As you unwrap a Halloween candy or two, it's worth paying your respects to the real reason for many of the treats, a tiny fly whose trick is to make chocolate possible.
They're all in the family Ceratopogonidae, which are the biting midges family, but not all of the adults bite. How we usually do it is we call them cerats.
Erica McAllister is a fly scientist at the Natural History Museum of London and author of The Secret Life of Flies. The cerats, as she calls them, related to no-see-ums, do a job that's very hard to get done by hand. They crawl through long, twisty cacao flowers, pollinating the stubborn cacao tree, which produces the beans used to make chocolate.
They are really, really difficult to pollinate. So you do need these little things to do it.
And to McAllister, at least, the tiny midges are a beautiful sight to behold.
They look like a very tiny mosquito, but they are basically absolutely covered in hair. They're very beautiful, very hirsute little organisms. And the males have got the most, they look like feather dusty antennae, because he has to not only smell for the female, he's listening, and his ears are on the antennae. They're not very robust, these things. They're tiny, as their name implies. And they've got nice external genitalia for the boys. Don't know what else you want me to say.
Well, here's the bad news. The chocolate midges are in danger as farmers clear out shade-grown rainforest plots in favor of sunnier monocultures of cacao. That threatens the tiny flies, which need the damp, rotting leaf litter of the forest floor to thrive. But some producers are taking notice.
Obviously, our human demand for chocolate has gone right up. So now a lot more research is going into fly pollinators, including these as well.
As for McAllister, she won't be joining you on that chocolate binge.
I can't stand it. Revolting stuff.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Ask aspirin use when appropriate. B, blood pressure control. C, cholesterol management. And S, smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Vernon Madison has been in prison, on death row, in Alabama, for 33 years. Now what? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. During those 33 years in prison, mostly in solitary confinement, Madison has suffered several strokes, and he now exhibits many symptoms of brain damage. He slurs his speech, he's disoriented, he's blind, he can't walk by himself, and he's incontinent. He also has no memory of the crime that put him on death row. But to the state of Alabama, none of this matters. Not his vascular dementia, not his cognitive deficits, not his severe memory loss, not his brain damage. Alabama still really wants to execute him. On Madison's side is his lawyer, Brian Stevenson, the renowned human rights attorney from the Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama. Stevenson argues that the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment prohibits the execution of a person who does not remember the crime and has no understanding why he's being executed. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments on this case on October 2nd. We will soon find out if 5 Supreme Court justices will or won't vote in favor of this state-sponsored killing. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
The news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
We're in the home stretch with Election Day coming up on Tuesday. Donald Trump is holding 11 rallies in the final 6 days of the campaign, and things are heating up in an already contentious election season. The Trump campaign released what's being called the most racially charged national political ad in 30 years, in which they accuse Democrats of plotting to help people they depict as Central American cop killer invaders run amok. The web ad surfaced on the day Trump announced his plan to send as many as 15,000 troops to the southern border to repel the caravan, which is still hundreds of miles and weeks away, and claimed he has the power to change the Constitution to end birthright citizenship with an executive order. Trump spoke with ABC's John Karl.
Okay, you're talking about 10,000, maybe 15,000 active duty U.S. military to the border, more than we have fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan, more than we have fighting ISIS in Syria.
Right.
You're really going to do that?
It's very important. We have to have a wall of people, very highly trained people, terrific, dedicated patriots. That's what they are. You have caravans coming up that look a lot larger than it's reported, actually. I mean, I'm pretty good at estimating crowd size, and I will tell you, they look a lot bigger than people would think.
What we see is deeply impoverished people fleeing violence, many of them women and children. You're going to send 15,000 active duty U.S. military?
Mostly men, and it's actually mostly young men, and a lot of rough people, John. They're pushing the women right up into the front, not good, and they're pushing a few kids right up to the front.
But they're 900 miles away. The active duty military, you know the law. I mean, you're the president. Yep. They can't arrest people crossing the border.
It depends. National emergency covers a lot of territory. They can't invade our country. You look at that, it almost looks like an invasion. It really does look like an invasion.
Those caravans are an invasion?
Oh, I think so. I think when you look at some of them, when you look at some of the people within the caravan, I think it could be considered an invasion of our country. We can't have it.
But there has been no formal national emergency declaration, which means those troops can only act in support of Border Patrol. doing things like transporting agents and building tents.
Appearing at a rally in Fort Myers, Florida Wednesday evening, Trump once again said he wouldn't be surprised if George Soros is funding the caravan of refugees headed toward the U.S. just days after a bomb was found in Soros' mailbox. Of course, CNN was sent 3 bombs, and Trump is still slamming the media as the enemy of the people.
33% of the people in this country believe the fake news is, in fact, and I hate to say this, in fact, the enemy of the people.
Trump was ostensibly in Florida to campaign for the Republican gubernatorial candidate, but he couldn't resist making it all about himself.
In less than 1 week, Americans will go to the polls in one of the most important elections of our entire lives. Although I will say, not as important as 2016.
In the final week before the midterm elections, details of a Republican scheme to disparage Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller began to emerge, and the plan began to fall apart. CNN has details.
It was first teased in a tweet, an apparent hoax being sold as a supposedly scandalous story about to break about Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The person behind the tweet, Jacob Wall, is a 20-year-old far-right online personality who in the past has been accused of fraud. It was a document claiming allegations of sexual assault against Mueller from an unidentified woman. Comments below from gleeful readers saying, "We believe the victim," and "LOL, time to rub it in." But just hours later, the site took the document down and said it was investigating both the allegations and their contributor, Jacob Wall.
It appears that they were trying to maybe smear the media, ourselves, Robert Mueller, and maybe the Me Too movement.
What has emerged is a dark and sloppy operation, now just a few days before the midterm elections. Wall, it seems, linked to a group calling itself Surefire Intelligence, which was trying to get the dirt on Mueller. Some, like the New Yorker's Jane Mayer, noting that the photo of a supposed managing editor at Surefire Intelligence on LinkedIn bore a striking resemblance to Wall himself. The tale growing even more bizarre after reporters started receiving emails from a Lorraine Parsons, who said she had worked with Mueller in the 70s, though the law firm has said it has no records of her being employed there. In her email, Parsons claimed she had been offered tens of thousands of dollars to make up a sexual allegation against Mueller. Mueller's office referred the matter to the FBI, which is investigating the alleged offers of money to various other women for bogus stories.
November has arrived, so it's now open enrollment time at healthcare.gov and various state healthcare exchanges. Yes, the Affordable Care Act is still with us, despite the Republicans attempting to repeal it dozens of times over the last 10 years.
You've been saying that Democrats want to take away pre-existing conditions. I mean, it's your administration that's supporting a lawsuit that would allow health
but I'm going
insurance
to
companies.
replace pre-existing conditions, and I've always been there. What the Democrats are going to do is they're going to destroy our entire health care, and you're not going to have any health care.
After that whopper, it's a good time to play this clip.
You remember well in the campaign, you made a promise.
In this journey, I will never lie to you. I will never tell you something I do not believe.
Can you tell me now, honestly, have you kept to that promise at all times? Have you always been truthful?
Well, I try. I mean, I do try. I think you try, too. You say things about me that are not necessarily correct. I do try, and I always want to tell the truth.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. UN Chief Antonio Guterres said Wednesday that world leaders have a duty to reject hate speech and xenophobia, days after a mass shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue that he described as the most abject act of anti-Semitism that's happened in the history of the United Nations. Speaking at a New York synagogue, Guterres described witnessing rising anti-Semitism since taking over the UN's top job last year, and said the trend seems most pronounced in Europe and North America. Referencing an unspecified political rally, Guterres described hearing the chant "blood and soil" and realizing that while to some the term sounded only like an expression of patriotism, the term had, quote, special meaning in the Nazi ideology.
This is something we need to be very attentive in our societies, because one of the logics of extremist organizations is to, in a subtle way, try to penetrate the mainstream and make some of their idiot ideas being accepted as a new normal. in our societies.
Gutierrez said the increasing impulse to blame religious minorities, migrants, or refugees for society's problems could owe itself to a sense by some that they've been left behind by globalization or technological progress. To address some of those insecurities, he encouraged politicians to make massive investments in education and to upgrade social safety nets. And in a veiled swipe at President Trump, who has refused to concede that charged rhetoric directed at the media, immigrants, or political opponents could be inciting others to violence, Gutierrez said leaders can't disconnect themselves as hatred bubbles up around them.
We have to condemn. We have to speak up. We have to be very firm in denouncing horrendous acts like the one of Pittsburgh. But we need to assume our responsibilities as leaders to prevent these things to happen.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Let's begin weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And we will be having a little warming trend, at least for today. The trend will be only for today. We topped at a high of about 59, 60 degrees yesterday. We will now be at 70 to 72 today, with an overnight low in the mid-40s. And then tomorrow, we will plunge back down to the low 60s. Okay, this is how people get pneumonia and the flu, so get your shots. All right? Please, please, please. We did have, as I said, the weather wasn't so bad. It sprinkled, didn't really rain on the kids last night as they were trick-or-treating. Though we did have a little bit of, I wouldn't call it rain, but a heavy mist during the day. And that was intermittent. And it looks like we will have the same conditions in terms of intermittent little sprinkles or heavy mist through the weekend up until Sunday, in which then that is supposedly going to change to showers. And as I pulled back from the satellite, it looks like there's quite a cell coming our way. So good for that. Right now, we are under cloudy conditions, and the winds are out of the east, light and variable, around 1 to 2 miles per hour, and will remain light and variable and out of the east until at least Monday right now. Ragweed pollen continues to be the major pollen that is affecting folks, and that is in the low range. Our air quality index has shot up to 65 parts per million in the moderate range, mostly indicative of folks burning wood in their fireplaces. And the daytime UV index is now at a low of 2, which means that we change our clocks this weekend, by the way. Fall back. I don't know how that made an association, but I'm giving it to you as a reminder. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.27 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles, and relative humidity is 96%. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. In fact, there's a few little personal weather stations here in the Rogue River Valley area that I cull from. And they live around the world too, if you compare them to all the people that live around the world. It's Thursday. Okay, that's my excuse. I don't know what kind of an excuse it is, but it's a Thursday excuse. London is 52 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 51 degrees with rain. Wow. In fact, Rome is 65 degrees with rain, and they do have a flood advisory from heavy rain. Kiev is 48 and cloudy. Kabul is 48 and fair. And I usually tell people when you have that weather prediction, it's not very fair to the wedding parties trying to have a wedding party when they're being killed by, bombs dropped from drones. But in Hong Kong, it's 68 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 54 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 and clear, and they don't even believe in Scientology, mostly. San Francisco is 58 and partly cloudy. And New York is 61 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively are not body thetans. And they do live around the world. Lynch and David Shepardson from Reuters brings us this offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Dateline, Washington. Chinese intelligence officers conspired with hackers and company insiders to break into private companies' computer systems and steal information on a turbofan engine used in commercial jetliners, according to a U.S. indictment unsealed on Tuesday. The indictment said that at the time of the hacks, a Chinese state-owned aerospace company was working to develop a comparable engine for use in aircraft manufactured in China and in other countries, probably with metal that they've culled from radioactive waste that they, got from us. Chinese-made jets, including the C919 and the ARJ21, currently use foreign engines, but the country has been trying to develop a competitive homegrown alternative. The 10 people charged conspired to steal sensitive data that could be used by Chinese entities to build the same or similar engine without incurring substantial research and development expenses, the indictment released by the U.S. Department of Justice said. It also said more than a dozen companies were targeted, but only Capstone Turbine Company was identified by name. I'm sorry, that's Capstone Turbine Corp. With the emphasis on that P when you pop it. Corp. The Justice Department, which I got to tell you is the Department of Justice because I'm the Justice Department, and I'm going to start taking these people to court real soon, said those hacked included a French firm co-developing a turbofan jet engine with a U.S. company. Well, there you go. And the indictment charges Zhao Rong and Che Ming, along with other co-conspirators who worked for the Jiangsu Province Ministry of State Security, a unit of the foreign intelligence arm of the Ministry of State Security. It says their efforts to steal sensitive commercial aviation and other data took place from January of 2010 through May of 2015. Uh-oh. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang said the charges were groundless because that's what he's paid to say. Or he better say it, or he could lose his head. The relevant accusations are pure fiction and totally fabricated, he told reporters in Beijing without elaborating because he's guilty. This is the third major corporate espionage-related case involving Chinese intelligence officers brought by the Justice Department since last month, and I keep telling you, Reuters, it's the Department of Justice. Fair use, I know, but come on. In late September, a Chinese national who had also listed the U.S. Army Reserve, who also enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve, was arrested in Chicago for working for Chinese intelligence to recruit engineers and scientists including some who work for U.S. defense contractors who have no allegiance to any nation as long as they get paid. In October, the Department of Justice. I'm going to correct you, Reuters. Damn you. In October, the Department of Justice also announced it had arrested a spy for China's Ministry of State Security on charges of economic espionage and attempting to steal trade secrets for several U.S. aviation and aerospace companies. This is just the beginning. John Demers, head of the Justice Department's National Security Division, highlighted the pattern in a public statement of those cases. Together with our federal partners, we will redouble our efforts to safeguard America's ingenuity and investment.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Cody Fenwick of Alternate brings us this final offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Well, it looks like Counsel Don McGahn, that White House guy that scooted out real quick, left the administration earlier this month in a pre-announced but still abrupt departure, with news of his last day only being revealed after he had already officially left the job, and he knew he wasn't going to get literally stabbed in the back and maybe his body parts put in bags. You never know. A new report from CNN, citing anonymous sources, of course, provides new behind-the-scenes details about McGahn's exit and shows the continuing animosity Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation has wrought, because they know they've been guilty from the beginning, because they're all Russian stooges at best. Well, McGahn reportedly left the job this month before his replacement, Pat Cipollone, had passed a background check. This unusually sudden way to depart came about because McGahn and Trump were both tired of each other. Well, that's a nice way of putting it. Okay, well, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we will be back here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we all deserve a French 77, and because we're all Nighthawks in the diner of life. So please do tune in for that. Stay tuned for all the breaking news on Netroots Radio all day and all night as it breaks, and we will visit with you tomorrow right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.